So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Warhammer 40K controversy, or at least are not caught up on the current situation, there has been a lot occurring over this weekend that I am going to break down in this video for all of you. But first and foremost, I want to explain that Warhammer 40K is a tabletop RPG that also has spawned many video games and novels about it. It has a big universe that the fandom has wanted to stay consistent. It has gone through a couple of changes, but none pertain to the kind of change that is being made right now. The change in question is that an elite force from the story of Warhammer 40K called the Adeptus Custodes are all male, okay, and there are apparently story reasons for this. There is plot armor to defend why this is a thing, and Games Workshop has now changed it. Now, there is a rumor spreading around that this was due to the Amazon show and that Games Workshop was being pressured, and we'll get into that in just a second. But for now, I want to focus on Warhammer 40K and how this controversy has become a war in itself, with longtime fans that have spent thousands of dollars on their product threatening now or even going through with canceling their Warhammer Plus subscriptions, selling off their figurines or refusing to buy new ones. I mean, these are some big dogs who have been playing for quite a while. Mark Kern, aka Grums, is one of those people that has apparently been a collector for some time. He, along with many fans, were not happy about this change. Not so much because the Adeptus Custodes were adding females, but because they lazily retconned it and tried to gaslight fans rather than trying to come up with a logical explanation for why these things exist in this story. Unfortunately, there is a misconception out there that fans are just bigots and racists and sexist and they just don't like women in their stories, which is not true, because many of the fans who have criticized this situation have also acknowledged that there were Sisters of Battle. I mean, fans have shown that they don't really care. It's not that they have a problem with this, but what they do have a problem with is a BlackRock-owned Games Workshop that is gaslighting fans as a way of announcing that they're retconning something in the story, allegedly because the Amazon show, Warhammer 40K with Henry Cavill, is going to reveal or introduce a female Adeptus Custodian. That has not made fans very happy. Of course, this is not helped by Warhammer 40K account blocking people en masse, blocking as many people as possible who question this retcon, which has also sparked more calls for a boycott, and none of this is being resolved. And unfortunately, this change has gone through. It's gone through completely, because you have right here from Grums, the 40K fandom wiki even changed the quoted lore. This is levels of gaslighting that could detonate a small city. This has to stop. And it shows these changes that the wiki made, changing these men right here to these warriors. They changed the lore. Right below my elbow there, you can see the Custodes is an elite cadre of genetically engineered transhuman male and female warriors who are even more potent in combat than the Adeptus Astartes. Yeah, it's really unfortunate that this is happening. So despite all of the fan backlash, despite the calls for a boycott and people canceling their Warhammer Plus subscriptions en masse, no changes are being made. And Games Workshop, they're not talking about this. They're just continuing to block people. And I think they have even gone a step further, which I will show you in just a second. But here's another example from Rich DK. He shows that the history was changed as well. Brotherhood of Demigods right here in this photo has been changed to an Order of Demigods, and this is them trying to introduce the female custodians in a subtle way. They just go into the lore, they go into the wiki and change it to adapt to whatever this plan is that they have, in which they're introducing female custodians that the fans are clearly against. I mean, they've made this very, very clear in numerous ways, including but not limited to a boycott of their product. And unfortunately, fans everywhere are getting the cold shoulder from Games Workshop, not just on Twitter where they're blocking everybody, but also in the Discord itself. Largest Warhammer Discord censors speech on Custodes. If you disagree with the change, you are a monster and subject to hate speech bans. That's insane. Custodes being undefined is a lie. The lore was very well defined, as I outlined in my former tweets with receipts, Grums says, and there are posts right here that show exactly what they're doing in this Discord. This is at everyone. I hate these kinds of announcements, but alas, some people don't know how to be anything more than monsters. Let's take it from the top. Games Workshop announced a change to an undefined piece of canon, female Custodes. First, let's have a reminder, and one of our various reminders: racism will not be tolerated in any context. There is no between the lines. Well, so where's the racism? With that said, the rules you agreed to warned you fairly that politics is subject to banning, and we're taking a hard line on this. Yeah, but their decision to change from male only to both male and female is a political move, especially when they have made it very apparent that they intend fully to inject 100% woke ideology into their stuff. DEI, ESG, you name it. They admitted this back in 2020 or 2021, I believe, in a tweet, the Warhammer Twitter. There's no question about it. They intend fully to do this, and the fact that they're being backed by BlackRock and Vanguard only reinforces this idea that they are trying to push diversity, equity, and inclusion at the expense of the story itself, because they have lazily inserted this into the universal lore. But this moderator goes on to say, if you have a problem with it, nobody is going to keep you here, but if you make it my problem, the mods are authorized to ban first and ask questions never. Discourse is good, but bashing on things because it doesn't fit your world narrative is not how we grow as a society. So if you disagree with the female Adeptus Custodes, you are going to get banned from the Discord. So much fun. You know, Discord is just so much fun. I just love when these companies decide that they're going to block and ban everybody that disagrees with them. Such a professional and mature way of handling things. And speaking of maturity, we're going to talk about what the media is saying in response to the backlash against Games Workshop and Warhammer 40K. So Warhammer 40K's new culture war crossfire is a mess of its own making. This is by Gizmodo. A single story about female custodies has made Games Workshop's sci-fi future the target of grifters and elements of a toxic fan base it has failed to stamp out. I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean, but it sounds very aggressive. I'm not sure why the fans that have been buying your product forever need to be stomped out as if they are some kind of unholy, unhealthy fire. I mean, these people have spent thousands of dollars and they're expressing themselves. It's not like they're not willing to have a conversation. It's that Games Workshop is unwilling to have a conversation. They're the people that are banning people from Discords and blocking them on social media. This is an irrefutable fact. I mean, it's happening. People are showing their receipts. So it's not like people are living in a wonderland where none of this is actually happening. But what can you expect when the media has this really twisted view of what Warhammer 40K is? I mean, these people show constantly that they're not really interested in what the story of Warhammer is, only that it has gone through changes in the past, and so therefore this change is okay. They're not even considering the fans in this one, because they say, and yet in spite of all of this, Games Workshop finds itself once again having to navigate another struggle with its audience that has increasingly become a problem in recent years. How its portrayal of the fascism at the heart of Warhammer 40,000's biggest faction has invited opportunities for people who align themselves with that ideology in real life to believe that they have a safe space within Warhammer's community to share and support those beliefs. So what the media is saying is, because Warhammer has an authoritative fascist imperium with space marines and a god emperor, that means that the fans who are criticizing it are a bunch of bigots who aligned themselves with the emperor, and they're authoritarian just like the emperor and his space marines, and that is who is attacking and harassing Games Workshop. Which is completely false, because I've seen people on both sides of the political spectrum agreeing in this situation. But they go on to say multiple incidents recently, from showing support for the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 to a European tournament prevaricating over whether or not to disqualify a player who showed up to play in clothing depicting Nazi iconography, have seen Games Workshop release statements rejecting hate groups and their place in the Warhammer community. But those statements in turn have relied on an increasingly precarious argument that it should be clear to bigots who believe that Warhammer's world supports them that, in fact, the setting is a satirical extrapolation of conservative ideology to its most evil and absurd heights, and that in turn it is making fun of their beliefs. So the media says, well, it's always been woke, and I keep hearing that argument all the time for a whole bunch of different IPs. This was always woke. That was always woke. You just failed to understand the politics of the story. They're making fun of conservatives. They're mocking you. They don't actually want you a part of the story. They want to get rid of you. That's what they mean by stomping out. These people believe that conservatives are the enemy of Warhammer 40K and bringing it down, and that they need to be eliminated. I don't know what kind of form that takes, but it is interesting to see them talk this way about people they have no idea about. But what more can you expect from the shill media that fails to understand the situations that they're arguing about? That stuff is rampant. You've got Kotaku doing stuff like that, and you also have Bell of Lost Souls doing that. Tabletop RPGs and pop culture, this is an outlet. Only bigots hate female Adeptus Custodes, so it's the bigots who hate them. This is clearly a political argument that the media is trying to push, because they're trying to make this political. They're not just saying, well, it's fans who are upset. No, it's the toxic right-wing bigot fans who are fascist and authoritarian. That's what the media is trying to say. Oh no, women are coming to ruin 40K. The bigots need to get over themselves about female Adeptus Custodes. And they go on and on and on, giving the most ridiculous arguments for why it is absurd for us to question these changes. Take a closer look at what the bigots are always mad about. The arguments about caring about the lore fell apart pretty quickly when you look at what people seem to be mad about, because it always seems to be when women get introduced that you see anger popping up on the internet. Female custodians, people care about the lore all of a sudden. No, people have always cared about the lore. I've seen several YouTubers become ultra successful just talking about the lore. They get plenty of attention. Warhammer fans everywhere love the lore. If they didn't love the lore, why would they get into this? It's the lore that is appealing to people who want to play in this universe. But they go on. The Primarchs have a mother. Protect the lore. MR Astartes was a woman. My lore. Game Workshop makes a major retcon to the entire setting, changing the timeline and lengthening the Indomitus Crusade. Not a peep. For that last one, Game Workshop even went back and rewrote parts of novels to correct the lore. They've never done anything like that before, an actual eraser of past lore. Yes, but only now people are starting to pay attention. That's why they're calling this out. There are a lot of factors, a lot of red flags that create a completely justifiable picture for people to look at and to criticize. I mean, it's fairly obvious what they are trying to do. You've got BlackRock and Vanguard funding this stuff. They are trying to push DEI really hard. They've admitted that that's exactly what they want to do, and they have stocks in this company, a lot, millions of shares between the two of them. So they're pushing those ideas down. Warhammer 40K Twitter, Games Workshop admitted that they're trying to push DEI years ago, back in 2020, and now we are seeing the result of what they said they're going to do. So it's not like anybody is making this up. It's a fact that's out there in public for people to see with their own eyes. But they go on, and yet strangely, no one really cared, threatened to burn their armies in protest or quit the hobby. And yes, I sure do love these disingenuous arguments, and I'm so glad that the Fandom Pulse pushed back on this, and boy, did they push back. It was great. TTRPG site Bell of Lost Souls attacks Warhammer 40K fans as bigots for disliking Games Workshop changes to lore. And it's not so much that they even hate the changes to the lore. It's really that they gaslit fans and they just lazily changed it without really giving any explanation. That on top of the fact that they're banning people from Discord, blocking people on Twitter who try to argue or question them about it, and it's certainly not helped by the Amazon rumor floating around that they're trying to introduce an armorless female custodian into the Amazon TV show, and because of that, Games Workshop was trying to play ball and make a subtle change so that it could support the TV show lore, which is ridiculous, of course, if it is actually true, and we'll read about that in just a second. There are a couple of more things that I have to cover, including this amazing roast from Fandom Pulse. They say in a mask-off moment, Bell of Lost Souls leaps headfirst into smearing the 40K fanbase, exposing their own seething hatred for the fandom they try to profit off of, as Apfel begins his article with, "Oh no, women are coming to ruin 40K, the bigots need to get over themselves about female Adeptus Custodes." And then they go on to say, Apfel then goes on to give an extensive list of background female characters who've appeared in Warhammer 40K in recent years, which according to him are part of a recent push by Games Workshop to diversify their setting. Interestingly enough, Apfel never once mentions any of the more prominent examples of females within the Warhammer 40K setting, such as the Adepta Sororitas, I hope that's correct, who go back to the late 80s. That was way back in the day, before I was even born, okay? I'm in my 30s, yo. That's crazy. And who made their first appearance as a full-fledged army in the late 90s during the second edition of Warhammer 40K. Nor does he mention the Anathema Sakana, the Sisters of Silence. So the female counterparts to the Adeptus Custodes, who make up 5 separate units, including a named character within the Codex. There are many other examples of female characters found in the tabletop game, but of course, the media is dishonest. Of course they're gonna lie. They have to shill for this. They have to, because they're on the side of pushing DEI into every medium imaginable. But they do say Bulls, however, doesn't mention any of them because to do so would immediately undercut their central thesis, and that is true, that the Warhammer 40K fanbase is made up of sex sexists and bigots, and that female representation in Warhammer 40K was all but non-existent until recently, when history shows that that's not the case at all. So it's really good to see that some outlets out there are doing their best to push back on this nonsense, sometimes pushing against the media itself, which I do think is necessary if you want to get real information out there, because a lot of people are going to be fooled if it's not pushed back on. And I'm glad that we have the Fandom Pulse, as well as that Park Place, who, by the way, are really good at consolidating all of this information, and it's really helpful because they're covering both what people outside of the situation looking in are observing, as well as the rumor for Amazon. And they point out an author and something that he said on social media, which I found to be really engaging, profound, and thoughtful. And I wanted to read this to you guys so that you could understand the context of what he's trying to say. So this is Isaac Young. I looked at the book that he wrote. It looks very interesting, but he says, of course, anything could happen in a story if we imagine it so, but no one in the history of good storytelling has ever written that way. Why do narratives abide by internal consistency? Why do characters fulfill archetypes? Why do we expect a logical progression of events? Because stories aren't just hypothetical word games where whatever we say goes. They are a reflection of our reality, however strange or distant. They are a part of the transcendent made manifest, no matter how silly or satirical. In short, they are important. And when you compromise that internal structure, that internal beauty, you are defacing it. That is the truth. That's what fans are trying to say. Stop being lazy. Stop trying to push an agenda, because what you're doing is that you're pushing that agenda so hard that you're completely glossing over the fact that you have to remain consistent in the lore, or at least try to figure out a way to inject the lore. That way you're happy, the fans are happy, no one's upset. You really do not just want to cater to the woke crowd, okay? That's not going to be netting you money. But he says, and it's especially ugly when you deface a piece of art for a blatant political agenda. I mean, it's very obvious what they're doing, like I said, everybody. That has no basis in transcendent reality. It's downright disgusting, and we all know it. We do. It's very obvious. But he says, but it's Warhammer. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And this was such a cool thing that he said. You guys have to hear this. If it wasn't serious, you wouldn't bother going after it. I'm especially tired of this argument. No matter how silly or over the top, stories are always serious, important business, because they are meant to be fun. Humanity has invested more energy into fun than any other endeavor. It's not something to be taken lightly. Just think how many trillions America alone has spent on every form of entertainment imaginable. Fun is a serious thing, and the left want to control it. So fun is not something to be taken lightly. And I just found what he said to be really cool, because it's true. America has spent a vast amount of money into entertaining people. And when that entertainment is jeopardized by something that can ruin the consistency or the immersion of that fun, it can throw a wedge in that flow of fun. I mean, the fans do find this stuff to be fun. Of course it's fun. And of course to some it is a hobby. But to a lot of people who have spent so much of their money and so much of their time in this universe, it matters so much more to them than the people who are just in the media shilling for this nonsense, who are just like, hey, stop being bigots. Like, these people don't understand. They don't care. They are not on this level. They don't understand why people love Warhammer 40K so much. Not just because they've never played any of it or read any of the books, but also because they're incompetent. But he goes on to say this push for ceaseless inclusion is nothing more than a show of power by defacing something people love. Absent of today's political climate, we all know they wouldn't be making these changes, and people shouldn't stand for it. It's wrong to destroy people's fun. Man, Isaac, I gotta hand it to you. I agree with you on every count of that. What a great thread, honestly. Which, of course, brings us to our last little tidbit here. This post from Bartrick, anchor and owner of Imperial News, is connecting a dot between what's happening with Warhammer 40K's retcon and the new Amazon TV show, and I found this to be really interesting. Now, of course, do not take my word for this, okay? This is a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. You can choose whether to believe it or not. It may actually be verified, or it could be debunked in a couple days. We just never know. I think that this has some validity to it, in my opinion, so that's why I'm sharing it with you today. But this person suggests it would seem that this little Femstodes announcement was nothing more than an effing stunt. According to documents, the records seem to impose that the Custodes were supposed to have females as a minor mention, a sweep under the rug, only to be mentioned in the codex and a minor story within it. No major changes, no additions, no models, just a mere mention and forgotten. Why a minor mention? because apparently the bees at Amazon have been effing around again. I said this would happen and I was effing right, and I hate it. So Amazon and Games Workshop have been at each other's throats as of late due to creative issues and differences, because assumingly Henry Cavill, Emperor bless his name, is going to be making an Eisenhorn Voxcast show, and one scene involves a female custodes being in the scene, given only a minor role, possibly 1 or 2 lines, and be memory hold and forgotten. However, in order for this to work and avoid extreme fan backlash, they had wanted to add it into the codex as they did and have it as a minor mention and let this blow over. And we all know that as attentive as people have become in pointing out anything that is woke in a TV show or movie, I mean, people have become adept at that kind of thing, and I do not use that word lightly. They're going to see something like that in the Amazon show, and they're going to roast it for weeks on end, and it might even ruin the show depending on how hard they emphasize that part of the show. With the female Adeptus Custodian coming out with no armor, I mean, you guys have to see the arguments that were made for this. The person who was anonymous, and this is why this is a rumor, said that female custodies are only going to be mentioned in the codex. No new sculpts or characters after the fact. Social media department jumped the gun and tried to put out fires with the wrong host. So if this rumor is to be true or has a kernel of truth to it, the people on social media who revealed that this retcon was always in the story were not supposed to say it. It was way too soon. The intent is to push female Custodes character in Amazon show without it breaking lore, but it already does break lore. They say because Amazon execs wanted a woman in power armor and wouldn't settle for Sisters of Battle, which is ridiculous, of course, because the Sisters of Battle are awesome, right? But how are you going to say that you're not breaking lore when you're breaking lore? I mean, they're breaking it. They're admitting that they're breaking it. They changed the wiki. I mean, it's right there, guys. Talks of inserting said female Custodes into Eisenhorn's story, with Cavill threatening to walk away from the project. Small stock drop today, but Games Workshop figures it can ride it out if it stays mum on the subject. But they go on to say the deal in the first place was super fragile, nothing was inked when Cavill announced it, and it sent everyone at Games Workshop into a panic. Shareholders put an immediate stop to any work until the contract was hammered out, and I'm pretty sure this is around the time, if this is true, this is around the time when Henry Cavill announced that the show was happening. So this was a result of that, allegedly. But they say that the negotiations were brutal, and if it could impact profits on the minis, Games Workshop didn't want to touch it, which is why this Custodes thing was a dumpster fire, and it continues to be. People who should have known about it didn't, and success or not, people are going to be let go. So people might get fired for this. They're going to get fired because somebody jumped the gun, and this entire situation with inserting female Custodes, that responsibility may be held not just by Games Workshop, but also by Amazon, who are notorious for making insane changes to an already established lore. Rings of Power. But from what I've been reading, it seems like they've been wanting to push a female Custodes thing so they can generate some press for the papers. You know, oh, our show is progressive, and then they're going to make a small mention of it and then never mention it again. But the fact that so much has happened because of producers wanting to insert this kind of thing into that show, it's caused irreparable damage. I mean, this is going to taint the image of Warhammer for a long time, at least until they either plummet to the very bottom or until they apologize and at least try to have a conversation with their fan base, because Games Workshop is not Disney, okay? They're not Lucasfilm and Star Wars where they can take a bunch of backlash, lose a bunch of money, and still survive somehow. I mean, Games Workshop is not that big. They're big, but they're not Disney big. And we've seen what happens to organizations like Disney when they don't do what the fans want. When they try to go against everything that is normal and try to insert an agenda that nobody wants, this is the result. But this person ends their statement in any case, we can put 85% blame on Amazon. Effing bees, they ruined the Silmarillion. What makes anyone think they won't attempt to ruin Warhammer 40K as well? And that is the exact question that I and many fans are going to be asking until this situation is resolved. And that is all I've got for you all in this video today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't had the chance to like it and share it with your friends, that would be awesome. And hey, if you're feeling ultra spicy, consider subscribing to my channel so that you're always up to date on what kind of thing I've got going on. I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Later. Meow meow.